Coming up on our newscast. Following a tightly contested race, conservative opposition Yoon Suk-yeol is elected as South Korea's next president. He edged out the ruling party's nominee by less than 1%. Leaders from the U.S. and neighboring countries congratulate Yoon on the victory. President Joe Biden was the first to call and reaffirm his commitment to jointly address North Korean threats. Over 300,000 new COVID-19 cases reported again, more than 206 related deaths. Officials believe the Omicron wave is nearing its peak and the curve could start to flatten. It's 10 p.m. on a Thursday here in Korea. Good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che, here to bring you the latest. Let us begin our newscast with our top story. Yoon Suk-yeol of the People Power Party is elected as a new South Korean leader. The former prosecutor general won the closest presidential race in the country's history by a margin of 0.73 percentage points. Kim Bo-kyung starts us off.
The People Power Party's Yoon Suk-yeol. That is who people chose to be the country's 20th president. On Thursday morning at 6:20 a.m., with all the votes counted, Yoon was declared the winner of the election after getting around 60,394,000 votes, 48.56% of the total. After winning by the finest margin in South Korea's constitutional history, a race even tighter than the 15th presidential election in 1997, where the gap was just 1.53 percentage points, Yoon expressed gratitude at the campaign's headquarters, saying his win is the people's victory while also emphasizing unity.
I have learned a lot. What is needed to be a country's leader and how one should listen to people's voices. The election is all for the people. Now that our competition is over, we need to get together and be one for our people and country.
Be treated fairly regardless of region, status, and political stance, and promised a better future.
I will always have liberal democracy and the spirit of Constitution in mind, take care of public welfare, always consider welfare for those in need, and do my best for South Korea to show national dignity, solidarity of responsibility, and freedom in international society.
Through Yoon's win, the Conservative Party brought about a change of regime after 5 years of Democratic Party rule. This brought an end to the trend of one camp seizing power for 10 years, ever since the direct presidential election system was introduced in 1987. Yoon Suk-yeol has become South Korea's 20th president a year after he stepped down from his role as the prosecutor general last March. He became the very first former prosecutor to be elected as president and the first president without any congressional experience. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The president-elect will take office 2 months from now. Yoon has already begun official engagements, paying tribute at the National Cemetery and giving a speech pledging to unify the country. Han Sung-woo shares with us his remarks.
South Korea's president-elect Yoon Suk-yeol vowed he would follow only the will of the people once he takes office in May. In his speech to the nation at the National Assembly Library on Thursday, the president-elect promised not to let regional differences or partisan politics get in the way of unifying the country.
If national interest and the people's interest, instead of political interest, become the standard of state administration, there will be no conflict between progressives and conservatives, no schism between the Gyeongsang-do and Jeollado provinces.
He also said he would protect liberal democracy at all costs, not stand for any form of corruption, and work to build an economy with a stronger middle class, driven by the people rather than the government. Yoon also brought up the need to cooperate with the Democratic Party of Korea, a key element that was reiterated later in the afternoon during the disbanding ceremony of his campaign team, where Yoon thanked the People Power Party and everyone else who had helped him along the way. As for foreign relations, Yoon said he would deal with North Korean aggression sternly, but also leave the door open for diplomatic talks. The president-elect added he would pursue a policy of mutual respect with China and a forward-looking relationship with Japan. The speech came after Yoon stopped by the National Cemetery in Seoul's Dongjaku district, where the former prosecutor general paid his respects to patriots who died fighting for the country, and also left a handwritten note saying he would create a prosperous nation of unity with the Korean people. The cemetery is the burial site of 4 former presidents, including longtime military dictator Park Chung-hee and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Kim Dae-jung, and visits there have historically been the first item on the official schedule of presidents-elect. Earlier in the morning, Yoon shared a phone call with outgoing President Moon Jae-in, who congratulated his successor on his victory and discussed ways for a smooth transition. Reports say the two could meet in person as soon as this week or the next. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Many are curious as to who the president-elect will appoint as key aides. Leading the transition team could be Ahn Cheol-soo of the People's Party, who relinquished his candidacy to support Yoon. The chief of staff has been virtually confirmed it will be the man who led that merger. Lee Kyung-eun has the details.
With his election campaign officially dissolved, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol is now on to forming his new team, tasked with launching his administration of national unity. The transition team, once it is formed, will be launched soon.
We haven't had time to think about the transition committee yet, but I will make a plan as soon as possible and launch it quickly.
Once launched, it'll be the first presidential transition team in a decade, as the incumbent President Moon Jae-in took office immediately following the impeachment of his predecessor Park Geun-hye. Top of the agenda for Yoon's transition team will be a pandemic recovery plan, which was also his #1 campaign pledge. Now a lot of attention is on who will actually lead the committee. It's highly likely to be Ahn Cheol-soo of the People's Party, given the remarks made when he and Yoon announced their campaign merger.
Candidate Yoon and I will work together closely, from forming the transition team to making a joint government with people from all political factions.
Yoon, in a press briefing earlier in the day, declined to comment on the job possibly going to Ahn. It's also thought the job could go to one of 2 former campaign executives. While things are still largely uncertain regarding the transition team, it's clear who's likely to be his chief of staff. That'll be lawmaker Chang Jae-won of the People Power Party, who was the key figure in Yoon and Ahn's last-minute merger.
Chang played a decisive role in achieving the merger with patience and perseverance. He enabled Mr. Ahn and me to trust each other.
Yoon, during a meeting with Moon's chief of staff Yoo Young-min, described Chang as his chief of staff. All of these officials could be confirmed in the coming days. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Just like many countries, the president-elect does not assume power right away. First, Yoon's transition committee will be tasked with establishing who will fill key roles in the new administration. Kim Sung-min walks us through what goes on leading up to inauguration in May.
Marking the 20th presidential election in South Korea, here's a pop quiz about the national event. As we all know, South Koreans voted for their new leader on Wednesday, March 9th. But when will be the president-elect be inaugurated? That is, when will they actually take power? The answer is May 10th. So what is actually going to happen in the 2 months between the election and the new president being sworn in? That's when the Presidential Transition Committee kicks into action. A new president means a new government. For the new president to form a government that they'll run for the next 5 years, they need some time to prepare for office, from conducting agency reviews to staffing a new administration. This whole post-election preparation will be done by the Transition Committee. The current form of transition committee has been used since 1992 when President Kim Young-sam was elected, and since then all administrations kicked off with the committee except for just one. So here's my second question. Which administration was that? The one exception is the Moon administration, as President Moon Jae-in had to quickly fill the spot left empty by the impeachment of former President Park Geun-hye. This also means the new committee will be the first presidential transition committee in 10 years. When forming a committee, a president-elect appoints a group of around 20 politicians and scholars who are deemed suitable for carrying out their policy goals and who share similar political values. In other words, by looking at who is on the committee, we can get a better picture of the new cabinet's policy directions. Once they have fulfilled their duties, the committee will have to release a white paper showing their activities as well as the budget spent. More details on the committee will be announced in the coming weeks. Those who want to take a sneak peek at what the next 5 years hold for the new administration might want to keep their eyes on the committee over the next 2 months. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Following the presidential election defeat, the ruling Democratic Party chair announced his resignation. Via a press briefing on Thursday, Song Yeong-gil announced he accepts the people's decision and takes responsibility for the loss. He also said the members of the party's Supreme Committee, which are the top elected officials in the bloc, will all resign as well. Song plans to spend the next 5 years working to create another DP administration as a regular party member. This means with just 3 months away from local elections, the DP's leadership is vacant. World leaders have been congratulating Yoon Suk-yeol on his win. The first to call was U.S. President Joe Biden. Among other things, they reaffirmed Seoul and Washington's alliance. Kim Da-mi brings the highlights from that phoner.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol and U.S. President Joe Biden in their phone call on Thursday morning reaffirmed the Seoul-Washington alliance, which the White House called a key pillar of peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. Biden also congratulated Yoon for his victory and said he hoped to deepen their cooperation in tackling global challenges such as climate change and the pandemic. He also said that South Korea has played a core role in supporting Ukraine. According to the White House, Yoon and Biden also pledged to work closely together in response to the threat posed by North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. In a statement released by Yoon's People Power Party, Biden asked Yoon to visit the White House after taking the office, which Yoon welcomed and hoped to meet Biden at an early date. The call was originally scheduled for Friday, but they instead connected at 10 a.m. Korea time on Thursday upon Washington's request. That's just 5 hours after the National Assembly accepted the election result. Earlier, the White House reiterated that the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. remains ironclad. Watchers say a Yoon-Biden summit could take place as early as May in Seoul, on the sidelines of Biden's visit to Tokyo for the Quad summit, though nothing is set in stone amid the crisis in Ukraine. Welcoming the election of Yoon as South Korea's next president, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also expressed hopes of working closely with Yoon to rebuild healthier ties between the two neighbors. According to Kyodo News on Thursday, Kishida underlined that it is fundamental that promises between nations are kept as a way to improve the currently icy bilateral relations. Kishida also told reporters that good Seoul-Tokyo relations are essential for world peace and stability, and that he looks forward to Yoon's leadership. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
International news outlets gave in-depth reports on how the new South Korean president will affect their respective countries. Japanese media expect bilateral ties to improve, while the U.S. anticipate the new administration to take a tougher approach to Pyongyang. Bae Eun-ji has the full story.
It wasn't just South Korean voters closely watching the neck-and-neck race. Major news outlets around the world also paid close attention to South Korea's incoming president. The New York Times said that Yoon Suk-yeol, once a prosecutor, went after former presidents. It added that it was South Korea's tightest race since the country began holding free presidential elections in 1987, with many voters lamenting a choice between the unlikables. It also pointed out that Yoon had called for ratcheting up joint military drills between South Korea and the U.S. that were scaled down under the Moon administration. The Wall Street Journal also reported that South Koreans have elected a president that would install a tougher stance on North Korea and closer ties with the U.S. In Japan, Kyodo News reported that some experts see Seoul-Tokyo relations improving under Yoon, once long-stalled communications finally get rolling again. But it added that Yoon is not expected to compromise on disputes over wartime history. The Japanese media also emphasized Yoon's remarks that he would visit Japan second after the U.S., once he becomes the president. As for China, the South China Morning Post reported that a former prosecutor has emerged as the winner of South Korea's bitterly contested presidential election after a neck-and-neck race. It said that Yoon is expected to take a harder line on North Korea and reset ties with China. China's Xinhua news agency also covered the victory of the main conservative opposition party and said that Yoon had pledged to build a relationship between South Korea and China based on mutual respect. 배은지, Arirang News.
North Korea's leader has been emphasizing the need to develop recon satellites, which could be interpreted as a prelude to returning to ICBM tests. The regime released a report on related plans as South Korea declared the election of a new president. Yoon Jong-min provides a deeper analysis.
Concerns are rising that North Korea could be about to resume intercontinental ballistic missile tests, its leader Kim Jong-un having stressed the importance of developing reconnaissance satellites. The regime's Korean Central News Agency reported on Thursday that Kim visited the North Space Agency and laid out plans to add the production of more reconnaissance satellites as part of the regime's 5-year development plan. Launching reconnaissance satellites requires technology similar to that of an ICBM. Late last month, North Korea fired a medium-range ballistic missile, which it claimed was a test for a reconnaissance satellite.
When it comes to launching surveillance satellites, you need to have a space vehicle, and the technology involved is very similar to the ones that you use to build intercontinental ballistic missiles. In a way, it's simpler than that because you don't need to have re-entry technology.
The report from KCNA came out early Thursday, right after South Korea declared that Yoon Suk-yeol of the conservative opposition had been elected president. The new South Korean government may have to focus more on managing the Korean peninsula, with the North having recently continued to signal that it's strengthening its armed forces.
Regardless of the presence of a new government in South Korea after the elections, North Korea had already threatened to carry out a number of almost red line crossing provocations this year.
Some experts also point out that North Korea continues to advance its technologies, but it remains to be seen whether Pyongyang will actually conduct an ICBM test because of the risk of heavier sanctions. Yoon Jong-min, Arirang News.
The nation's daily COVID-19 tally remained above 300,000. The figures are close to what authorities view as the peak of this wave. To ensure the medical system can handle the situation, the government reviews having hospitals treat some coronavirus patients in regular wards with others. Choi Min-jung brings the updates.
South Korea on Thursday reported 327,549 new COVID-19 cases, surpassing the 300,000 mark for the second straight day. It's a slight drop from the previous day, but still the second highest daily figure reported in the country. Health authorities say the peak phase of Korea's Omicron wave will likely last for the next 2 weeks, and cautiously predicted that cases will be on a downward trend from then on. Therefore, they say the country should prepare itself for a surge in severely ill patients in the coming weeks. The number of severely ill patients and deaths is already on the rise. On Thursday, the country saw the second highest number of deaths at 206. There were also more than 1,100 people in critical condition on Thursday. Authorities forecast this figure to rise to 1,700 to 2,700 by the latter half of this month. The proportion of ICU beds being used increased slightly from Wednesday to 59%. But outside the capital, that figure is over 70%. And almost 1.3 million people are at home isolating and recovering from COVID-19. That's 76,000 more than the day before. Given the current situation, the government is seeing the need to treat COVID-19 patients in regular wards. Authorities are currently in discussions with medical experts to allow hospitalized patients who have mild COVID-19 symptoms to be treated in hospital wards they had already been admitted to. This way, hospital beds can be used more efficiently for COVID-19 patients who are in more dire need of medical treatment. Authorities are also planning for the medical system to acknowledge test results of rapid antigen tests, reducing the need to get PCR tests. Choi Min-jang, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, the foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine held the first high-level talk since Moscow started its invasion. The meeting comes after Ukraine accused Russian forces of bombing a maternity ward at a hospital. However, the session ended without any progress. Ji-young has the latest.
The foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine have met for face-to-face talks but ended without any progress. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov discussed a 24-hour ceasefire, but no agreement could be reached. This was on the sidelines of Diplomacy Forum near Antalya in Turkey, with their Turkish counterpart also participating in the meeting. Kuleba called on creating a humanitarian corridor to allow citizens to evacuate from the city of Mariupol close to the Russian border, but he said Minister Lavrov was not in a position to commit himself to it, as it seems there are other decision makers for this matter in Russia. Kuleba said his counterpart brought traditional narratives to the table and stressed that Ukraine will not surrender.
I want to confirm once again that Ukraine did not surrender, is not surrendering, and will not surrender. We are ready for diplomacy. We are looking for diplomatic solutions. But while there are no such solutions, we will be dedicated by sacrificing ourselves to defend our land, our people, from the Russian aggression.
Lavrov said that if the Western nations had not rejected their proposal on security guarantees, Moscow would not have engaged in conflict with Ukraine, adding that the West is behaving dangerously over Ukraine. Lavrov added that Russia is willing to continue negotiations with Ukraine, and President Vladimir Putin would not refuse a meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky. Although officials from Kyiv and Moscow have held several rounds of talks, this is the first time that Moscow has sent a minister since the start of Russia's invasion last month. Thursday's meeting comes a day after an apparent Russian airstrike hit a children's hospital in the city of Mariupol, where at least 17 were injured. Ji-young, Arirang News.
With the rise in daytime temperatures, fine dust particles will be more widespread tomorrow. Central regions, 충청도, 전라북도, and Gyeongsangdo provinces will see dust levels standing in the bad category. Make sure to have a mask that filters out the dust particles. Dry weather advisories have been lifted for parts of western regions. However, eastern parts of the country are still under extreme dryness. Warnings are in place for the east coast, and gusty offshore winds are also in the forecast. Winds may be gusting up to 15 meters per second, and the combination of strong winds and dry conditions can lead to fires, so please take precautions. Expect partly cloudy to overcast skies for the morning. Seoul will start off at 4 degrees Celsius. Daytime highs will be 2 to 5 degrees warmer than the seasonal norms. Seoul will get up to 16 degrees. Gwangju 19, Daegu and Gyeongju will be warm at 22 degrees. Cloudy spells are expected for the time being. On Sunday, nationwide showers are in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.